Good morning, gentle beings. Did you know that gentleman was a specific term for a specific type of person? Something like someone who owns at least 10 plots of land or something like that. It was something about being a landowner of a specific tier. The idea that that has been changed to mean nothing more than, a nice person is interesting, I guess. I had a quandary, I guess. I'm not sure. I have for some time been quite annoyed with the applying new meanings to words. I actually wrote a post about it on the Today Takes Everything blog about the word myriad. The word myriad was defined as, at the point when I was in high school, it was defined as 10,000. Not a bunch, not a plethora. 10,000. 10,000. 10,000. It was misused in one of my, I guess it would have been AP English. Not sure if it was AP in sophomore year or, no, that would have been junior year. Yeah, whatever. And the teacher read it and was like, no, this is wrong. And the homework assignment for the next day was everyone brings in a dictionary. So everyone brought in a dictionary, and we all opened it up, and the next day looked at the word myriad, and it said 10,000, except I think 1 or 2 dictionaries. And she said 10,000 is the meaning, 10,000 was the meaning when I was learning, and 10,000 is what myriad means. And since then, that's part of why it sticks particularly in my memory. Since then, it has been, devolved and evolved into meaning pretty much whatever the colloquial use is, which I did not support. Then I started to do a little bit more investigation into, the history of language, and, Merriam-Webster or the New English dictionaries, word of the year, struggle for relevancy, just annoyed. It was a ginormous annoyance to me. Ginormous. Giant and enormous, except longer and less efficient. It's not a word, okay? You can call it a word as much as you want, and you can get BuzzFeed to retweet your yearly article about why blog is the word of the year. It doesn't make it a word, alright? So, after being quite annoyed with all of that, I looked into I looked into words and the evolution of words and how language changes and all that. And the only thing I really came up with as a possible negative for this evolution of language is it kills the ability to communicate correctly and effectively with your grandparents. It's accelerating at this point that you probably have difficulty communicating with your parents if you adopt the complete modern colloquy. But I was like, oh well, I guess I concede the point. Language evolves, it changes over time, whatever. And I realize now, I don't know, intentional or unintentional, or by the ruler of this earth intentional, something that breaks down communication. First of all, the big idea, the big point to consider is that this happens as a this is happening very fast. And while historically words had changed and meanings had changed and colloquialisms evolved, it was not something that happened in 2 generations. You know, while a word might slowly change over time, it's not going to change so rapidly. The language would not change so rapidly that you couldn't understand your parents, or your parents rather couldn't understand you, and you certainly couldn't understand your grandparents, and vice versa. So the idea that is you know, a form of attack, that this upside downing of the world is just ongoing, it's a Christian idea, actually. And at this point, I think it's clear to any casual observer the effort to turn things upside down, you know, to call evil good and good evil. And if you want to be, you know, not even say good evil or good, or if you don't believe in that, you can take it to, you know, right and wrong. That can be completely inverted. Male and female, completely inverted. It's just an inversion. It's an inversion and a perversion of all of this stuff. So, I had originally been annoyed with it and then conceded the point, and now I'm back on it. So, I don't think the language should change this fast. It almost shouldn't be allowed to change this fast. And people should understand that when they do so, they're breaking down communications in the communication I was talking about yesterday, that you get to talk to your grandparents and exchange information across generations and benefit from the experiences of other people who love you and care about you. I was reading an article yesterday. I was barely reading it. I was skimming it. It was so annoying. It was an article about a woman who was on Medium. She suffered a traumatic brain injury and wasn't sure what to do and didn't know if she should go to the hospital. She felt weird, and it slowly degraded over time. All I read was the context. You know, to write a story, you know, I was driving in a car and then all these things happened to me. It's like, well, where were you driving to? When were you driving? Why were you driving? What was your state of mind while you were driving? You know, there's a lot of context that gets applied to all this stuff. And I just don't want to call it victim blaming, because it's like she didn't do anything. She was in a lift. Someone else was driving the car, and they suffered a rear end collision, and she received a concussion, which she left untreated. And she experienced these symptoms, which were easy for her to dismiss, and easy for friends to be like, you know, whatever. And part of it was, you know, she was out drinking and she couldn't drive, and she wanted a burrito or something like that. So she went out in the middle of the night to do this, and it was after, I'm almost positive it was after 2 o'clock in the morning, or after midnight. It was like, don't be out during that time. Drunks are out during that time. It's a bad time to be out. It's all this context around it. And in the meantime, she's like, I suffered this issue that was clear only to someone observing me, and it's clear she has no support structure in this city. She has no family that she has, you know, a weekly dinner with, that if she had people around her who loved for her and cared for her, that this wouldn't have been a problem. Or at least it would have been mitigated severely, you know, immediately. You know, you can't show up to a family dinner on Friday and just be out of it and be like, oh yeah, I had a car accident, my head kind of hurts. It's not a big deal. And then the next week do the same thing, and then have your family be like, whatever, you know, what's up with you? Stop coming to this dinner. You're annoying. Because you you fall asleep randomly, and you have emotional outbursts, and you're confusing, and you haven't been the same ever since that car accident. Instead, she's just alone. And it's so sad. And it's voluntary, but it's also on purpose. It's people who are attacking this family structure and turning people into these human flesh units that are just expected to go to a new city. Well, this didn't work out. Go to another city. Who cares? You don't need a support structure. You don't need a family. You don't need a steady boyfriend. You don't need anyone who cares about you. You've got money. Yeah. It's disgusting. And it's so... You can't even show up at church and not have people be like, hey, you've been kind of out of it the last few times. What's up? Are you okay? Pray for me. I had a car accident and I've been having dizzy spells. Oh, okay, yeah. How are your dizzy spells? Follow up on the prayer card. How are you doing? Are you okay? We've noticed ever since you had that accident, you've been a little out of it. Like, what's going on? Are you okay? We're gonna, you don't have medical care, we'll chip in, we'll see what we can do. It's just no support structure. And it's not because that person has chosen not to have it, it's because it was knocked out from under them. There's a lot of complicit parties, obviously, but I don't know, I find it hard to blame someone. This is like the millennial thing. You can't blame a millennial that as a child and as a young adult and as an adult has done nothing but everything they've been told to do by the people who they trust. You need to do this and then that'll happen. Okay, well that didn't happen. What do I do? You need to do this now. Okay, now what do I do? Well, now you need to do this. Okay, well, I'm $200,000 in debt. I don't have a job and I'm in a city that I don't know anyone. And I don't have any support. I'm not connected with my family. What do I have here? And how do you blame them for being upset about that? I was talking to a friend of mine we meet frequently. I talk about productivity and, I don't want to say like workforce management, but kind of that. And he was talking about the millennials that's just like they communicate through the phone. Like it's all through the phone. And I'm like, can you blame them though? Like when you communicate through the phone, they have done studies on this, at least enough that I suspect they might be somewhat accurate, or at least observably accurate, since apparently over 50% of scientific studies can't be reproduced. It's all wizardry. That the more time you spend, this is for kids, the more time you spend staring at a screen, the less time you spend staring at faces, and the less capable you are to read the emotions on other people's faces. So if you're basically inept at communicating a certain way, then why would you choose that means of communication? Like he says, they want to communicate via the phone, but that's just not efficient, and I can't really tell, a lot of what's coming through. That's why you should use emoticons and stuff like that. I was late to the game, but it's the correct way to use text communications. But I'm like, can you blame them though? Like, they've been told that this is the way to communicate, and they stick their nose in this, and it debilitates their ability to read emotions on the faces of other people. So an emoji is a lot easier to read for them. I mean, all that is reversible. The more time you spend away from a screen, the more capable you, at least this is the study in children, so children have a lot more neuroplasticity, more ability to rewire their brain. But it's like, taken an entire generation and like raised them wrong as an experiment. What was it? Kung Pao. Oh, yeah. What was that guy's name? This is Lo Mein. We have trained him wrong as a joke. It's like an entire generation has been trained wrong as a joke. It's like, oh, this is important. Oh, wow, okay, I'll learn this and I'll get a job. Yeah, that wasn't really important. That was nonsense. Like, good luck. Thanks for the hundreds of thousands of dollars that you can't bankrupt out of. What an unbelievable system. All right. None of this is fun to talk about. But maybe it's time we talk about things that aren't fun to talk about.